Chapter 1. Understanding the Community. 24th February 2024 marked 2 years since the invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation. The war has caused displacement, destruction, and profound human suffering. More than 14 million people, almost 35% of the population, have been forced to flee their homes, seeking refuge both inside and outside the country. The result has been the separation of families, the abandonment of their homes, and the loss of their possessions, and has exacerbated numerous protection risks for the displaced. The exact death toll is not known, but is estimated at over 10,000 civilians killed, including more than 560 children. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, more than 5 million people have fled the country and are in other European states. In addition to these refugees, another 7 million have fled their homes and are now living in other parts of Ukraine, according to the International Organization for Migration, IOM. Since the beginning of the conflict, millions of Ukrainians have been forced to flee their homes, seeking refuge both within the country and abroad. Those who remain inside Ukraine are referred to as internally displaced persons, IDPs, and face a range of difficulties, from food insecurity and lack of adequate housing to limited access to health and education services. Living conditions for these IDPs are often precarious, and many live in temporary shelters, collective residences, or with relatives, with no clear prospects for return or resettlement. Internationally, Ukrainians have resorted to seeking refuge in different EU countries. Ukraine's neighboring countries, such as Poland, Russia, and Hungary, have received the largest influx of Ukrainian refugees, but they have also emigrated to France, Italy, Spain, and Portugal. One of the main destinations has undoubtedly been Poland, due to its proximity and the existence of a previously established Ukrainian diaspora. However, the reception of refugees has not been without its challenges. Many refugees face linguistic, cultural, and economic barriers that make integration difficult. Despite the existence of asylum policies and support programs, the reality is that many refugees find themselves in vulnerable situations, working in informal and low-paid jobs with limited access to basic services and often facing discrimination. The psychological impact of displacement and conflict is incalculable. Separation from family members, uncertainty about the future, and the trauma of living in a war zone profoundly affect refugees' mental health. Leaving one's own country as a refugee in the midst of armed conflict is an immense trauma, marked above all by the loss of homes and exposure to violence and danger. This context of forced displacement brings with it a constant sense of uncertainty and vulnerability, affecting all aspects of individuals' personal and daily lives. For adults, the experience of becoming a refugee often involves a strong emotional and psychological impact. The loss of stability and security, coupled with the responsibility to protect and provide for their families, can lead to high levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. Concerns about the future, uncertainty about their ability to establish a new life in an unfamiliar country, and difficulties in accessing basic services and employment opportunities contribute to a persistent state of distress. Disruption of daily routines and adaptation to new cultures and systems are also additional sources of stress. Children, for their part, experience the impact of displacement in different but equally profound ways. Separation from friends and family, disruption to their education, and adaptation to new school and social environments are enormous challenges for young children. Children are often more resilient than adults in some respects, but are also particularly vulnerable to the effects of trauma. Exposure to violence and loss can manifest in behavioral problems, difficulty concentrating in school, nightmares, and other symptoms of post-traumatic stress. In addition, the sense of security and stability that is fundamental to children's development is severely compromised in situations of forced displacement. In terms of education, refugee children and youth face significant disruptions to their schooling. Education systems in host countries are often unprepared to integrate large numbers of refugee students, resulting in additional barriers to their development and well-being. However, there are ongoing efforts by various organizations to provide inclusive education and educational support to these young people. The provision of psychological support and integration into local communities are essential for refugees' recovery and adaptation, although there are numerous barriers that must be overcome to achieve this. Humanitarian organizations and NGOs play a vital role in providing psychological support and essential services, but available resources are often insufficient to meet demand. Despite these and other challenges, the resilience of the Ukrainian refugee and migrant community is remarkable. Many have shown an admirable ability to adapt to new circumstances and seek opportunities to rebuild their lives. Community networks, both formal and informal, play a crucial role in providing emotional and practical support, helping refugees navigate their new environments. However, while they have great resilience and hope for the future, it cannot be denied that the Ukrainian refugee community in host countries faces a number of urgent needs. These needs require a coordinated and comprehensive response from host country governments, international organizations, and civil society. Through joint and sustained efforts, it is possible to improve the living conditions of Ukrainian refugees and facilitate their integration and contribution to their host communities. Below are the main areas of need and associated challenges. Housing. Access to adequate housing. Many refugees face difficulties in finding permanent and affordable housing. They live in temporary shelters, hostels, or with relatives, which is not always sustainable in the long term. Housing conditions. The quality of housing can be poor, with problems such as overcrowding and lack of basic services. Second, employment. Job opportunities. Obtaining employment is essential for self-sufficiency, but refugees often encounter barriers such as recognition of their qualifications and lack of local work experience. Working conditions. Many refugees end up in informal or low-paid jobs, with precarious working conditions and no access to employment benefits. 3. Health. Access to health services. Access to healthcare is limited. Many refugees lack health insurance and face difficulties accessing physical and mental health services. Mental health. Trauma, associated with displacement and armed conflict, requires adequate mental health services, which are often inadequate or non-existent. 4. Education. Access to education. Refugee children and youth need to be integrated into local education systems. This includes the need for additional support, such as language classes and remedial programs. Education infrastructure. Local schools may be overburdened and may not have the resources to cater for large numbers of refugee students. 5. Legal and administrative assistance. Legal status. Refugees need support to navigate complex asylum and residency processes. Lack of information and legal assistance can lead to exploitation and immigration status problems. Documentation. Obtaining official documents such as work permits, identification, and access to public services is crucial. 6. Social integration. Language barriers. Learning the language of the host country is essential for integration, but it can be a long and challenging process. Culture and community. Cultural and social integration is essential. Refugees need opportunities to connect with the local community and participate in social and cultural activities. When a community is forced to leave their country and arrive in a host country, they face different and complex challenges that are not easy to cope with. The Ukrainian refugee community has found refuge in several European countries, but this does not mean that everything is a bed of roses, far from it. Upon arrival in another country, they face many difficulties, the main one being the language barrier. From there, in their day-to-day lives, they may encounter very unpleasant situations stemming from xenophobic and racist contexts that only hinder the integration process. Refugees may face negative attitudes and discrimination from the local population, receiving insults, marginalization, etc., undermining their self-esteem and emotional well-being, and making effective integration immensely difficult. The prejudices they face can manifest themselves in employment, education, and social settings, limiting opportunities for growth. The resources available in host countries also shape the adaptation process for refugees. These countries may be overwhelmed by the number of refugees and may not have sufficient resources to provide adequate support for the integration process with all that this entails. When a country receives a significant number of refugees, this can put considerable pressure on its infrastructure and services. Funding for refugee support programs is often inadequate. This may be due to a lack of the host country's own resources or insufficient international assistance. Lack of funding affects the quality and quantity of services available, such as language courses, counseling, job training, and community integration programs. Without these services, refugees face greater difficulties in learning the host country's language, finding employment, and adapting to local cultural and social norms. One of the main challenges is the capacity of host countries to provide adequate housing for migrants arriving from contexts of armed conflict. Temporary shelters may become permanent due to a lack of alternatives, leading to overcrowded and unsanitary conditions that negatively affect the health and well-being of refugees. In addition, education and health systems may be overwhelmed, limiting access to quality education and essential medical services. Limited funding can also impede the development of effective integration policies, creating a sense of abandonment and marginalization among refugees. This situation not only makes it difficult for refugees to adapt, but can also increase tensions between refugees and the local population, creating an environment prone to discrimination and conflict. In short, host country resources are critical to the refugee adaptation process. Without adequate support, both refugees and their host communities can face significant challenges that affect the social cohesion and economic development of the country. It is essential that the international community work together to provide the necessary financial and technical assistance, ensuring that host countries can effectively manage refugee integration and promote an inclusive and sustainable environment for all. The engagement and participation of the host community is essential to address the needs and challenges faced by the Ukrainian refugee community in host countries. This approach not only significantly improves the quality of life of refugees, but also brings tangible and intangible benefits to local communities. The reasons why community engagement and participation are vitally important are explored in detail below. First, the social and cultural integration of refugees is essential to building an inclusive and cohesive society. The active involvement of the local community in hosting refugees helps to reduce prejudice and xenophobic attitudes. Through direct contact and collaboration in various activities, greater understanding and empathy towards refugees is fostered. In addition, the integration of refugees in cultural, sporting, and educational events promotes social cohesion, facilitating cultural exchange and the building of positive relationships. This interaction not only benefits refugees, who are able to maintain and share their cultural identity, but also enriches the local community with greater cultural diversity. Another crucial aspect is economic support and access to resources. The local community can play a critical role in creating employment opportunities for refugees. Mentoring programs, job training, and employment networks can facilitate their integration into the labor market, helping them to achieve self-sufficiency. In addition, community collaboration improves refugees' access to essential services, such as health, education, and housing. Local volunteers can offer practical assistance and guidance in navigating complex bureaucratic systems. By integrating into the workforce, refugees not only secure their own livelihoods, but also contribute to the local economy, increasing the diversity and resilience of the labor market. Strengthening support networks is another significant benefit of community engagement. The involvement of the local community in hosting refugees helps to build social networks that provide emotional support, practical assistance, and a sense of belonging. Local non-governmental organizations and volunteer groups play a vital role in providing services and ongoing support to refugees, ensuring that they receive more personalized and consistent assistance. In terms of education and personal development, community involvement in the development and implementation of educational programs, including language courses and cultural integration programs, facilitates refugees' learning and adaptation. Community initiatives can also provide opportunities for training and skills development, improving their employment prospects and their ability to contribute positively to the local community. Community resilience is also strengthened through engagement in hosting refugees. Communities that actively participate in hosting refugees develop a greater capacity to respond to future humanitarian crises, as the experience gained strengthens social cohesion and improves the ability to respond to similar situations. In addition, refugee integration can foster innovation and adaptability within the local community, by incorporating new ideas, skills, and perspectives. Last but not least, community engagement in hosting refugees reflects and promotes fundamental humanitarian values, such as solidarity, empathy, and respect for human dignity. By actively participating in the hosting of refugees, local communities contribute to the global responsibility to provide shelter and support to people displaced by conflict and persecution. This involvement not only benefits refugees, but also strengthens the moral and ethical fabric of society as a whole. By working together, communities can create an inclusive and supportive environment that not only benefits refugees, but also enriches and strengthens the community as a whole, promoting a model of coexistence based on solidarity and mutual respect. Toolkit 19. Assimilation versus integration. Exploring the impact on identity and well-being. Activity title: Assimilation versus Integration. Exploring the impact on identity and well-being. Aim of the activity: to help participants understand the difference between assimilation and cultural integration models, and their impacts on migrants' emotional well-being and identity. To promote reflection on how reception policies and social attitudes affect migrants' adaptation, and to foster empathy towards their experiences. Activity description. This activity combines individual reflection exercises, group work, and discussions for participants to analyze the implications of cultural integration and assimilation in host societies. Hypothetical cases and role-playing dynamics will be used to explore the emotional and psychological consequences of each model on migrants. In addition, participants will reflect on how they themselves can contribute to creating spaces for integration in their communities. Materials needed: case scenario sheets, see description in the instructions. Paper and pens to write reflections. Flipcharts to record the conclusions of each group. Cards with keywords: assimilation, integration, identity, xenophobia, multiculturalism, etc. Markers and sticky notes for group work. Duration of the activity: 90 minutes. Group size: 8 to 20 participants, ideal to split into groups of 4 to 5 people. Step-by-step instructions. Introduction: 10 minutes. Briefly explain the difference between the concepts of cultural integration and cultural assimilation. He defines the objective of the activity and mentions that they are going to work with hypothetical cases to study in depth the effects of these models on the lives of migrants. Individual reflection: 10 minutes. Ask each participant to write down on a sheet of paper their initial thoughts on what is meant by integration and assimilation, and how they think these processes affect migrants' identity and emotional well-being. Invite participants to share some of their ideas with the group to open the conversation. Distribution of hypothetical cases: 15 minutes. Divide participants into groups of 4 to 5 people. Give each group a hypothetical case file describing the experience of a migrant person in a host country. Each case should reflect a different situation, one under an integration model and one under an assimilation model. Case examples. Case 1. Integration. Omar, a migrant who arrives in a country where he is allowed to maintain his traditions and receive support in his language, feels respected and motivated to participate in society. Case 2. Assimilation. Lena, a migrant facing policies that require her to abandon her language and customs in order to be accepted into society, feels increasingly isolated and confused about her identity. Ask the groups to read the case and discuss the emotions and challenges that the person in question might experience. Role-playing: 20 minutes. After discussing the cases, assign one member of each group to represent the case person, Omar or Lena, in the examples above, in a role-playing exercise. The other members of the group should ask the character questions about his or her experience and how he or she feels about his or her identity and acceptance in the host country. After each role-play, allow each group to share their impressions of how the models of integration or assimilation affect the character and their feelings of belonging. Debate and analysis: 20 minutes. Facilitate a whole group discussion on the effects of assimilation and integration models. You can pose questions such as, what is the difference between feeling that you can be yourself and feeling that you have to pretend to fit in? Which model, integration or assimilation, allows for a healthier coexistence in a diverse society. How do these models influence migrants' self-esteem and emotional well-being? Write down key findings on a flip chart or whiteboard. Creation of an integration space, 15 minutes. Ask each group to design an ideal social integration space for their community. This could be a cultural center, a mentoring program, a support group, etc. Each group should describe the characteristics of this space and how it promotes integration rather than assimilation. Invite the groups to share their ideas with the rest of the group and brainstorm on how to implement these spaces in their community. Closing and final reflection, 5 minutes. Reflect with participants on the importance of creating spaces for integration in their own communities and how this helps to build more inclusive and cohesive societies. Finish by asking each participant to write down one concrete action they can take to support integration in their community. Reflection and closing. To close, pose questions such as, how did the role play make you feel? Did you empathize with the character's situation? What did you learn about the effects of integration and assimilation models on migrants' identity and well-being? What actions could you take in your daily life to encourage integration rather than assimilation? Evaluation method, reflection diary. Ask participants to keep a reflection diary over the next few weeks, in which they record their observations on the treatment of migrants in their environment and any actions they have taken to support integration. After 1 month, organize a feedback session to share learnings and evaluate how the activity has influenced their attitudes and actions. Activity variants. Special guest. Invite a migrant or NGO worker to share their experiences and perspectives on integration and assimilation. Community projects. As a follow-up activity, organize a community project where participants create an integration space in their community, such as a multicultural event or a language fair. Tips for the facilitator. Make sure that all participants understand the difference between integration and assimilation before starting the role-playing. Foster a respectful and safe environment where participants can share their thoughts and experiences without fear of judgment. Motivate participants to reflect on their own prejudices and how they can contribute to a more inclusive community. Additional notes: it is important to emphasize that integration does not mean the loss of identity, but the coexistence of multiple cultures that enrich society. Adapting this activity for different contexts or ages can help participants better understand the challenges of migrants and their role in creating an inclusive community.